practice with the curtains up, you know. And so that little boy that had just started to school, he says, Miss Emma, may I have, no, he said, can I have this ball? I didn't even look around to see him and all, and I kept on working. I said, no, that ball's in a dispute. Not thinking, you know, that I was using a word that maybe he'd never heard and didn't know the meaning of it. And so I kept on working, and he said, look here, Miss Emma, this ball's not a disputing now. And he's tossing it up towards the ceiling. And that tickled me, so I just quit laughing. I knew what I'd done. I used too big a word.
Yeah.
Teachers had whipped him several times before he was in the 3rd grade. Had whipped him several times, and he never did cry. And I'd whipped him 2 or 3 times, and he didn't cry when I'd whip him, but I didn't whip hard. I was afraid, you know, they said not to whip when you was mad. You'd hit too hard. And so I was afraid I'd hit too hard, and so he done something, and I made him stay in, and I was going to talk to him, and I says, now, Paul, I says, I've whipped you several times, and it hurts me as bad to whip you as I hurt you. Now, you take the switch and whip me. And that boy cried and wouldn't take the switch. And he was good quite a while, but still, he wasn't long till he was back in getting into meanness. He was into meanness nearly all the time. Except there was 3 stores, I think, and a drugstore and a blacksmith shop down here called Newburgh, right down here.
That was in 1905.
Yes, 1905 when we first moved here.
Just a minute. This Miss. What is your name, Miss Davis? Is it Miss Davis? Your name?
Emma.
Emma Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Emma Davis.
But my maiden name was Black.
Oh, Black. I see. Mrs. Emma Davis. I was getting your name on this. And you moved here in 1905?
Yeah, I was here on. We moved the week after Christmas, you know, and then when New Year's Day come in 1905, well, we was up here.
Yeah, and what kind of homes did you say they had?
Just a 4-room home. It's 2 rooms this way, you know, and then a side room that is went plumb across, but then had a partition in there and had a cook room and a dining room.
Usually log houses, were they?
Huh?
Log houses?
No, it was a plank house.
Plank. Were there many Indians in here?
Well, we bought a lease, and the lease belonged to an Indian girl that lived over here, but she was married. No, she married after we moved up here. And she married a fellow by the name of Miller. But then I forgot her name, you know.
Yeah.
But then she owned the land where we bought the lease. But we just bought a lease, and we moved down to Stewart when the lease was out.
You know there's a sign on the road to Allen down here, Shawnee Town. You ever seen it?
I never noticed it.
It's a historical sign.
Well,
Beside the road, it tells about Shawnee Town, what it was, cemetery. I know where it is. I've been out there. Is it the only cemetery right around here?
yes.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you, before they moved the cemetery over there where it's at, why, A.G. Black has got a land, you can see his house across over here, from here, and there was 2 or 3 graves in his field, and they had some tombs there. Now, that might have been called that graveyard that you spoke of, but it's just 2 or 3 tombs in his field.
Well, the reason I asked you if it was Love, you said this girl's name was Love.
Well, they own this land all
And I
over.
thought maybe they might have given that land to the cemetery and they called it Love Cemetery.
Well, you see, they moved there's some graves, and I reckon A.G. has never moved the stones, but then is in his field, and
I see. Probably still there.
and they started the cemetery here, and they might have named it Love, but then he had a home over there, close to where the cemetery was.
Yeah.
Did cross her on the ferry boat, but I think they had one down there.
Yeah. Yeah, up here, in there, in that neighborhood where the bridge is, there was a ferry there somewhere. And I think it was called Grayson Ferry. I don't have much information on that yet.
Well, I just couldn't say. I don't know.
When they moved Newburgh and called it Atwood, they moved it down, they called it Atwood.
Yeah.
Do you remember about how many stores there were there at the time they switched? They at Newburgh. A while ago you said there were 3 when you moved here first.
Charlie Irvin had one, and Grandpa Ritter had one, and John Campbell had a store. And that's all I can remember of now.
Mhm. You know, I have a list of 34 or 5 post offices that's been in Hughes County, come and gone. Like Newburgh, it had a post office. And
At Newburgh, and they had a drugstore, and well, I can't remember.
yeah. You lived, did you live in Stewart when you moved down there? You said you went.
No, we lived closer to a schoolhouse out in the country named Rock Creek. A schoolhouse named Rock. Excuse me.
Rock Creek, yeah.
In one of the rooms, just in his dwelling house, you know, and he run a little store. And I don't remember whether he run the post office or what, but
He was the first postmaster.
well, I couldn't tell you. But we always got our mail at Stewart.
Yeah. Well, Jacob S. Smith was the postmaster.
Well, Jake Smith was his name.
Well, where was that from Rock Creek Schoolhouse?
Huh?
How far was that from the Rock Creek Schoolhouse?
Well, just about as far from here at the barn, if you can see the barn.
Well, I think I know about where it was. Somebody else told me and that there was a store in there somewhere, a short ways from the schoolhouse. Well, that clears that up.
He was on the road, you know, that went across, and the road then, after we passed his house, the road turned, and right down just a little ways was the schoolhouse.
Yeah, I know right where it was then. I know where it was.
Well, it was in a dwelling house.
Yeah.
But I don't remember him running the post office, but still, I knew he had a little stuff to sell, you know, because I know one, I can't think of what I want to say, but I know what it is.
Well,
The April Fool's Day, and all the pupils run off but my sister and I. And we knew better than to run off. We knew what we'd get at home. And so the teacher went up there at the store and bought some candy and treated us. And he must have dismissed us, I can't remember, because if the children ever come back, they didn't come back while we was there.
Yeah.
And their
Yeah.
whole school went off but just Betty and I. It's a rather smart piece from here. You may know Monroe is not too awful far from Poto.
Yeah. I've heard.
Poto, but I believe it's closer to Hal than it is to Poto. And so the teacher, most every summer, why he'd treat us on ice cream, and of course the pupils would bring cake, you know, and we'd have ice cream and cake. And I know that the pupils used to be bad to get a hold of a chunk of ice and put it down each other's shirt or neck, get a tar, and when the wheels got to squeaking or anything, why they'd take the tap off the wheel and take that wheel off and put some tar on it. And so they'd hang that bucket out on the back end of the wagon somewhere underneath, and they called him Tar Bucket. And one boy got up on the stump out there in front of the schoolhouse, and Professor Malone was standing in the door on the steps. and listen to that. They just let them have their fun. And they said, "Now, boys, answer to the roll call." And they began to call their names, the nickname. And they called Monroe Shine. It said present. And then they called Shaghead. His present. And then when they got, there were several of the boys, and when he got to Tarbucket, he talked long and drove, and he said, "Still a-hanging on." Well, the one that was calling roll fell off the stove. And Professor Malone was up there just dying of laughing there.
I'll take it down.
Well,
The two portraits,
uh-huh.
Mrs. Emma
Now,
Davis.
my niece, my nephew's daughter, and her husband was here, and they had me to say it, and they taken it off on a recorder once.
I'm going to take it.
And so I think then if you want it here.
Take it.
The two portraits. In the studio of the painter stood a boy with wondrous down, as he gazed upon the painting that adorned the walls around. Pictures of God and heroes worshipped in long ago, when the mind of men was set with the pomps of mortal show. There was Jove, white-armed Juno, aged, strong, and divine, and Asher, the swift-footed, for whose wrongs such thousands bled. There the dying gladiator turned his dim eyes to the ground. There Provisus in his torture to the vulture rock was bound. Long the little fellow stood there in his innocence and joy, and the painter at his easel was enraptured by his face, for it seemed the very image of a cherub pure and fair, in his young and blooming beauty, and his bright and joyous airs. Eyes of blue and lips of ruby, like the poet dream of old, and his hair fell to his shoulders in a wreath of shining gold. And the painter thought within him, "This is an ideal face. I will paint it as an angel, for it's most like heaven's race that has ever met my vision." So he painted there the boy in a type of those bright spirits in a land of deathless joy. Years passed on, and still the picture hung within the painter's room, but he wished to find its equal in darkness, crime, and gloom. Wished to find the face as finished as this child's was sweet and free, for he longed to see how hardened a human's face could be. And he searched through all the prison and the haunts of crime and pain, and he sought a demon's likeness, but still he sought in vain. Till one night while yet he painted, came a light step on the floor, and he turning saw the features he had longed for o'er and o'er. For a man stood there before him, clothed with rags, and with a face scarred and pierced in all of its features, with no touch of human's grace. Crime had left its seal upon him, which comes but to blight and to blast. And the painter thought within him, "I have found my face at last." Rising quickly from the canvas, forth he placed a chair, and said, "Sit down here." And without an answer straight his unsummoned guest obeyed, and he sketched upon that canvas outline of that face of crime, emblem of the power of evil and the ravages of time. When the sketch he had completed, turning to the man, he said, "What has drawn you to my chamber at this hour of midnight dread?" And the man rising in answer, "Do you wonder that I come at this hour of midnight lonely, thus unbidden to your home? Listen, yonder hangs a picture of a merry, laughing boy, which you painted for an angel in his innocence and joy. And if you wish to know how fearful is the power of crime to blight, look on me. That was my likeness, and lo, thus I am tonight. I shall die before the day king paints the east with morning glow, for my strength is fast departing, and life's sand are running low. But I long before departing to look once more upon my face, as it was in life's glad morning, ere one sin had left its trace. Long to see once more the pictures that my mother used to praise, as she led me through the meadow and along the forest way. Oh, those days of joy and beauty, gone from me forevermore, gone with that dear loving mother to some far off distant shore. But I hear the midnight watches tolling mournful and slow, and my eyes are growing dimmer, Death is calling, and I go. Forth he went, and the painter, wondering, gazing on those faces there, one the type of an angel beauty, and one the image of despair. And his spirit said within him, as the lie, the face will be, for we all are painting portraits for the great eternity.
Do you happen to know, you mentioned Ritter a while ago, had a store over here. There was a Ritter post office. There was a Ritter post office.
Well, now there was
But it wasn't here at Atwood.
well, I know that there was a Ritter girl married Sam Irvin, and he run the post office here,
Yeah.
Sam Irvin, a long time.
Now this was Ritter.
But this woman was a widow. Sam's wife was a widow. Sam Irvin's wife was a widow. And Ritter's has run a store here at Newburgh and at Atwood too for a long time, but they've sold out. And they're out of the store business. And you know, one of the Ritter boys that worked in the store over here passed away and was buried here just a week or two ago.
Well, this fellow who ran this post office was Bayless Ritter.
Huh?
E. Bayless Ritter. And I've got it on back east and south of here somewhere.
But I don't
I've got
remember.
a name Stony Point on here. That'd be on the other highway, wouldn't it?
I don't remember any Ritters running the post office here, but I knew the Ritter girl's husband run the,
Yeah.
not a store, but the post office.
Yeah. Well, listen. You never taught in any Choctaw Indian school, did you?
No, but there was a Indian little girl went to school with me. I was her first teacher when I taught in Pittsburgh County down there at Ward Springs, but I don't know what what Indian she was. But I never did ask. But then they said her parents talked the Indian language just there at home, but they could talk our language, you know, and the little girl could talk our language, and there was just a two-teacher school down there at Ward Springs, and the teacher, I was just the assistant teacher, and the principal, you know, pupils, they'd ask this little girl, and it seemed like she was glad they'd pay attention to her and ask her a question, and they'd ask her what certain words stood for in Indian language.
Yeah.
And they put it, I wouldn't remembered it if they hadn't to put it in a sentence. And it says, I'll fumble you, ya, and I'll uppa. And fumble means I'll whip you, and you'll cry, and I'll lie. I'll fumble you, and you, ya, and I'll uppa. That's Indian language, but I don't know what tribe.
Yeah. Well, do you recall the old patent medicine wagon that used to come around so often over the country? Well, one of them, I'm trying to think of the name of one.
Raleigh man?
Raleigh.
My father did run the Raleigh around here for a while. He had he had a chill, and then pneumonia or a pressure in his side, you know, and then they thought TB was setting up, and all he was in the bed 3 months, and so he got the job of peddling the Raleigh medicine, and he peddled it a year or more.
Here, around in this country here, around Atwood.
Yeah.
And his name was Black.
Ian Black.
I.N. Black.
Isaac Newton.
Uh-huh. Well, Raleigh, and there's 2 or 3 of those. Well, I wanted to ask, I'd like to get some idea on the health, people's health back in that early time when there wasn't any hospitals. The medicine hadn't advanced very far. And the health, it seemed like, see, I've been reading newspapers, I've got the Holdenville Daily News, began publishing back there in 1900. And they take the papers at Dallas, and they had them put on microfilm. That's little, you know, so you have to take a microfilm reader and it blows it up where you can see it. It's small. And I've been reading that, and I've read up to through 1913. And reading all through there, it seemed like the health was a pretty bad problem, a pretty big problem, the health of the people. So many people died just like to be a right young person as is an older person with TB or something like that, and they actually didn't know sometimes what was taking them. But it seemed like of course they didn't know how to operate on a lot of things, and a lot of these troubles we're having now that they have to go to Oklahoma City and diagnose and all that, of course they just call it something else by symptoms. And back then, the lifespan wasn't near as long as it is now. Indians died with tuberculosis quite a lot, didn't they? Do you remember, do you recall the Indians having tuberculosis? That is, seemed like the Indians would, had tuberculosis quite a lot.
Well, now, those Loves over here, I think most of the whole family died of TB.
Yeah.
Now, this land here that we own, well, Dwayne owns most of it. He bought it from the other children, but I still own my share of it, and I own the improvements here, because Louis and I built this house, and I owned a house over there on the other side of Atwood, and we tore the old building down and built this while we had to furnish some new lumber, but then I sold the lots and paid for the new lumber, and the improvement belongs to me. There to William Lathan, and they own this land, the 80 acres. Well, they have built a new church.
Because didn't have those Indian churches like that.
Well, I don't reckon that was called an Indian church here, but then there was a church over there, and the Atwoods went to that church, you know.
Yeah.
The Atwood girls and children, you know.
There was an article in the newspaper about somebody coming to Atwood and investing in business. They bought a hotel. Do you remember a hotel being at Atwood?
I sure do.
Where was it located?
Well, it was a two-story building, and it's you know, the highway where it goes in there. There's a filling station on one side and then on the other, and then on down towards Calvin, on down east.
Yeah.
Well, used to be a filling station there, but then it's just a workshop now.
Yeah.
Fred Hayes run
Yeah.
it, you know, and
Yeah.
he quit. Well, right across up on the hill south was where they
Oh, yeah.
was where they I can't think of it now. You call this name, you ask me about it. That's the way I am. I started telling the thing, I can't think of it. Hotel.
Hotel.
If they quit using it for a hotel, you know, they did have a central office in there. That was before we got this other kind of electric.
Yeah. And Parhams
Yeah.
ran that central. They were running it when I knew
And they had to have boxes on the wall, and they had to have batteries in there to run. Instead of electricity, we didn't.
I remember those old things. Of course, then back
called Salt Creek.